Yes, I am
Yes,
unmuted.
yes, that's okay. So here we start.
Yes, please.
Welcome all our beloved delegates, and we are all senior colleagues. Today, in the second PG class of Saturday of 25th of April, we are going to learn some basics about the MRI of the spine. And we are really obliged to Dr. Naveen Lakhani, who is happened to be chief MRI consultant and radiologist at Saral Diagnostic Center, working in Pritampura. He has a good amount of experience of more than 15 years in the radiodiagnosis field. And fortunately, he happens to one of my senior in my college time. And I think everybody in the North India, North Delhi must be knowing about him. So I'm very kind that Dr. Naveen has been agreed to give his time to us. And now, without wasting any time, I will request Dr. Naveen Lekhani to take over and start his presentation. And anyone who would like to put up their questions can just put on their chat so that the question can be forwarded to Dr. Naveen Lakhani. Right? Thank you very much. Let's proceed. Thank you, Naveen. Handing over to Naveen, please.
Thank you so much. Uh, and I really thank for inviting me for today's lecture. And I am absolutely delighted to talk to postgraduate students of ortho of all 3 years. So let us discuss today MRI spine basics. Let us start with MRI principle. Are you able to listen me all? Okay.
Yes, we can. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes. So let us start with principle. Hydrogen is the simplest and most abundant element in the human body. Its nucleus, that is the proton, acts as a small bar magnet. When placed in external magnetic field, there is alignment of the hydrogen ion, leading to a net magnetic vector in the direction of the external magnetic field. Short bursts of radio frequency pulse are given. It disturbs the equilibrium. When the RF pulse is withdrawn, the hydrogen ion come back to their original state. In this process, they emit signals which are received by the receiving coils, and these signals are then processed to form anatomical images. So when placed in external magnetic field, our body acts as a magnet. Now the rate at which the excited protons return to equilibrium, the tissue can be characterized by two different relaxation times, that is T1 and T2. Using different radio frequency pulses and detecting the signal after variable time intervals allows different tissue types to be highlighted. This is just the basic MRI principle. So basic MR sequences in spine are T2, T1, and STIR. That is short tau inversion recovery sequence. Now this is a T2 weighted image. CSF is white in color. This is a T1 weighted image. CSF is black in color. Now this is the most important difference between the two basic sequence, that the clear fluid, that is CSF, is white in T2 and black in T1. Fat, this is the fat, this is the pelvic fat, subcutaneous fat. It is white in both T1 and T2 WI. T2 is a slightly colorful image. T1 is a dull image, like a CT scan image. Now this is a STIR sequence. This is a unique sequence that it is like a T2 weighted image. It is equivalent to a T2 weighted image, that CSF is white, but all the fat is suppressed in this. So basically it is a CSF, this is a T2 weighted image in which fat is suppressed. This makes it a very unique sequence in picking up any small edema or inflammatory disease. So just tabulating this same information, this is one of the most important information in basics, that on T2, CSF is white, on T1, CSF is black, fat is white on both T1 and T2. You can see the reference image also. On STIR sequence, which is a equivalent to T2. So CSF is white, but fat is suppressed in this. Now T2 is sensitive for degenerative spine. T1 is sensitive for fat replacement disorders like metastasis. And STIR is sensitive for any small edema or inflammatory diseases. Let us see a few examples. Now this is a sagittal sequence of cervical spine. This is a T2 weighted image, T1 weighted image, and STIR image. T2, CSF white, T1, CSF black, STIR, CSF white, but fat is suppressed. So this, you can see there is mild hyperintensity, mild white along the end plate of this vertebra, barely visualized on T1, but very well picked up on a STIR sequence. This is an edema along the end plate, which is very well picked up on STIR. This makes it a unique sequence in picking up any small pathology, any small inflammatory edema. So again, one more case in which we are able to see all these three sequences. This is cervical spine sagittal image. This is very clear to everyone that we are dealing with, all these are sagittal images of cervical spine. We can see CSF white, we can see a part of cord, these are the vertebrae. We can see a white spot here in the vertebral body on T2 as well as on T1. There's a white spot. So anything which is white on T1 and white on T2 but is suppressed on STIR is a fat. So this is a focal fatty marrow oblique a small hemangioma. Now let us talk about some basic terminologies of degenerative spine. So there are three kinds of disc herniations, as we all know: protrusion, extrusion, and sequestration. So again, a T2 weighted image. So as I told you that T2 weighted images are more sensitive for degenerative spine, T1 for metastasis or marrow replacement, and STIR for any inflammatory pathology, any small edema. So this is a T2 weighted sagittal image of lumbosacral spine. If the size of the disc herniation is smaller than the neck, it is a protrusion. If size of the disc herniation is larger than the neck, now this disc herniation is larger than the neck, this is a disc extrusion. This is an axial image, T2 weighted image. CSF is white in this. Fat is also white. You can see cauda equina nerve roots. Pathology is depicted in color. So again, if the size of the disc herniation is smaller than the neck, it is a protrusion. If size of the disc herniation is larger than the neck, it is a disc extrusion. So once again, I am just defining extrusion. So if a disc herniation is larger than its neck in any one plane, either sagittal or axial, it is an extrusion. Now again, a color depiction of the pathology. You can see a disc herniation going down. So this is a disc extrusion with caudal migration. Migration towards the tail end is caudal migration. So disc extrusion with migration in this. But if the disc herniation or disc extrusion loses contact with the parent disc, it becomes a sequestration. As in this, it has lost the contact with the parent disc. Let us see examples. So if the disc herniation is in contact with the parent disc, it's an extrusion with caudal migration. If the disc herniation loses contact with the parent disc, it is sequestration. An axial image. If the disc herniation is at this location, this is central, paracentral or paramedian, foraminal, or extraforaminal. So any disc herniation at this location will be called as left extraforaminal disc herniation. And depending upon size and all, it can be a protrusion, extrusion, or sequestration. So let us see now some clinical cases. So T2 weighted sagittal sequence. We can see a large disc herniation. Size is larger than its neck, so that's an extrusion. An axial image is taken at this level. It is central and more on the left side, left paracentral. So this is a case of large sized posterocentral left paracentral cranially migrated disc extrusion causing marked compression of cauda equina nerve roots. Now these are cauda equina nerve roots. This is the lower end of cord. These are the cauda equina nerve roots, and it is causing significant compression of the cauda equina nerve roots. This is an axial image. I think it is at this location. Another case. This is a sagittal image. The location of this sagittal image is seen as the red line in this axial image. So this is the location. So this is the left parasagittal location. We can see a T2 weighted image in this. As it is going through neural foramen, we are able to see a nerve in the neural foramen at this level and this level. But there is some soft tissue, low signal intensity soft tissue is lying in the neural foramen. So an axial section at this level is taken at this level. So we are able to see a T2 weighted image and a T1 weighted image. We can see CSF white, CSF black. These are the cauda equina nerve roots, very well visualized. And we can see this soft tissue lying in the neural foramen and extraforaminal location. So a case of large sized left foraminal and extraforaminal cranially migrated disc extrusion at L3-4 level causing compression of left L3 nerve root, which we would have seen in the neural foramen, causing its compression. Nerve is lying here, getting compressed. So it's a foraminal, extraforaminal disc extrusion. So let us see this case. This is the patient came with back pain for last 10 days and increased ESR. Radiograph, lumbosacral spine, radiograph, lateral view shows reduced disc space. Sagittal stir image, CSF white, all fat is suppressed. We can see heterogeneous signal intensity involving L3 and L4 vertebral bodies, involving the intervening disc and causing reduction of the disc space. So this is a case of early spondylodiscitis, likely tubercular. Another case, history of neck pain with progressive numbness in bilateral upper and lower limbs. T2 weighted. So this is the sagittal sequence of cervical spine. T2, T1, stir. CSF white, fat suppressed. So we can see some heterogeneous signal intensity causing destruction of the two adjacent vertebrae and the intervening disc with mild vertebral collapse. There is a prevertebral soft tissue with areas of breakdown. So it's a prevertebral abscess. An epidural abscess is also seen in this location, causing compression of the cord. So this is a T2 weighted image. T1 weighted image is similar finding, well visualized, and a stir sequence. So here I would like to say, why did I start with T2, T1 and stir and not T1, T2 and stir? Because T2 is a very important sequence in MR in whole body. And if I have given option to take any one sequence, I will take T2. So always it's good to start seeing any case at first being a T2 image. And here again, it stresses upon the importance of stir. You can see that these two vertebral bodies, as well as these two, which are also involved and showing some marrow edema, not well appreciated on T1 and T2. But because of its fat suppression and T2 character of this stir sequence, it is able to pick up edema even in these vertebrae. So we know now that 2, 3, 4. We know C5, C6, C7, D1, D2, D3. So this is the extent of the disease. Axial image is taken at this place. We can very well appreciate the prevertebral abscess as well as the epidural abscess causing cord compression. So Cary's spine, C5 to D3 with epidural and prevertebral abscesses causing moderate cord compression. Another case came with complaint of back pain, weakness in both lower limbs, and urinary retention. Sagittal image of lumbosacral spine. You can see retention of urine. The urinary bladder is distended. We can see altered marrow signal intensity involving 5, 4, 3, L2 vertebral body, causing its mild compression. There is a mild collapse with gibbous formation, compression of chorda equina nerve roots, involvement of posterior elements is also seen. Now, screening of whole spine of this patient was done. We can see even larger lesion at cervicodorsal junction. One dorsal vertebra is also involved. So this case I have kept to really show the importance of screening whole spine and always to assess the extent of disease before starting the treatment so that we can follow up the case till end and know when it is healed completely. So this is a case of multifocal spinal tuberculosis, which is very commonly seen in clinical practice. Another case of, this is a stir sequence of cervical, dorsal and lumbar. Stir sequence, CSF white, all fat suppressed, very sensitive for any edema. We can see multiple areas of multiple patchy edema, heterogeneous edema involving vertebral bodies, spinous processes. A small posterior epidural abscess is seen. A small prevertebral abscess is seen. So again, a case of multifocal spinal tuberculosis, very commonly seen in our daily practice. Now this case is sagittal T2, CSF white, sagittal T1, CSF black. We can see caries of lumbosacral junction. Prevertebral abscess is visualized, involvement of disc space, marrow alter signal intensity. The abscess, the prevertebral abscess, white on T2, slightly black on T1. So 1 year of ATT was given to this patient and scan was repeated. We can see there is resolution of the prevertebral abscess. There is no prevertebral abscess. There is resolution of the marrow edema. And a very important point is that there is fatty replacement of the marrow on T1WI, which is a very important finding. We usually look up for this. Whenever we say it is a completely healed case, we see complete replacement of the marrow with fat on T1WI. All this is fat in the vertebral bodies. So there is a replacement of the fatty marrow. This is a case of healed Cary's spine. Another case, pre-ATT, post-ATT, adjacent vertebral bodies are involved, loss of intervening disc space, small prevertebral abscess, epidural abscess causing compression of cord. After complete ATT, we can see some collapse of the vertebral bodies, but there is complete fatty marrow replacement, resolution of abscesses in the prevertebral as well as epidural location. So there is fatty infiltration on T1WI. So T1WI, when I'm saying, that is T1 weighted images. healed. So it's also a case of healed Caris spine. So a young man coming with complaint of episodes of back pain and morning stiffness since many years. Stern sagittal sequence of cervico-dorsal spine. CSF white, fat suppressed. We can see multifocal edema in the vertebral bodies at multiple levels. Axial section was taken at the level of the pedicle. We can see involvement of bilateral costovertebral joints. So bilateral costovertebral arthritis with marrow edema. MRI of SI joint was done. There is bilateral sacroiliitis, irregularity of the articular margins with subchondral marrow edema, very well visualized on stud sequence. So this is a case of inflammatory spondyloarthropathy, that is ankylosing spondylitis. So sagittal images of lower dorsolumbar spine, T2, T1. We can see patchy areas of low signal intensity on T1 and T2 WI. This is a 60-year-old patient, a follow-up case of CA breast. And we can see focal areas of marrow replacement on T1 WI. A case of metastasis. This image I have kept in order to show the importance of T1 WI, which is very sensitive for any metastasis. And we can also see a mild vertebral collapse of one of the vertebra. So a 72-year-old female patient with history of fall and backache since 3 days. We can see mild vertebral collapse, T2 weighted image, T1 weighted image, STIR image, lumbosacral spine, sagittal view, mild vertebral collapse of the vertebra 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 of L1 vertebral body on T2 and T1. Edema is seen on STIR sequence, which makes it acute compression injury. Marrow edema is also seen in L4 with mild compression. Fracture of S2 segment is also visualized. So this is a case of acute benign osteoporotic vertebral collapse. Now this is, all three are T1 weighted images. CSF is black in all three. Marrow is white, fat is white. We can see mild compression fracture in all three images. This image I have kept to show the difference between the benign and malignant collapse. In cases of benign collapse, we will be able to see some residual fat always. We'll be able to see some residual fat. But if this is a malignant collapse, there will be complete replacement of the marrow. There will be complete replacement of the marrow with concave margins. So if we are able to see concave margins and complete replacement of the marrow in a compressed vertebral body, it is most likely a malignant collapse. So summing up, basic MR sequences are T2, T1 and STIR for spine. CSF white on T2, CSF black on T1. STIR is an equivalent to fat suppressed T2. STIR is a very sensitive sequence for marrow edema of oblique small inflammatory edema. T2 is sensitive for degenerative spine, and T1 for marrow replacement disorders like metastasis. Disc extrusion is defined as when size of the disc herniation is larger than its neck in any one plane, it's a disc extrusion. Healed Caris spine on MR can be characterized by resolution of marrow edema and abscesses and complete fatty replacement of marrow on T1 WI. Benign collapse shows residual fatty marrow. Malignant collapse, there is complete marrow replacement with convex margins. Sorry, it is wrongly written, with convex margins. Thanks a lot for your kind attention.
Dr. Naveen, thanks for such a nice presentation. And I wish the residents must have gained a lot from this. Now this is open for discussion. So if anyone of the panelist or the faculty member would like to ask anything from Dr. Naveen.
Dr. Samir, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, can I ask? Yeah.
Sure.
Dr. Naveen Lakhiani, no doubt it was a fantastic talk. I would call ourselves very fortunate because we would normally see your signatures on fantastic reports that you sent to us for treating our patients, and we could see you live doing what you do in your office. So my question is, can you just tell us what about contrast and non-contrast? Now this confusion is always there, especially for youngsters. Many of us, किन में हम contrast करते हैं और किन में हम non-contrast studies करते हैं?
Because of this being a basic lecture, I did not keep anything complicated or in this. But if I generally say, then in spine and in musculoskeletal, and about 30% of cases I give contrast, and about 70% contrast is not required. Okay. Now, if there is an inflammatory disorders of a borderline quality, any borderline cases, like if, as I was showing you, a healed spine, if there is a complete replacement, it is fine. But if it is, I'm able to see some marrow edema on star sequence, and there is some areas of T1. So basically on borderline cases, in cases of spine, we give contrast. For all, if there's a cord lesion, we give contrast in all cases. If there is a tumor soft tissue component and we are not able to differentiate between an abscess or our areas of breakdown or a solid component, then we give contrast, or a vascular anomalies. So basically 30-40% cases we give contrast to differentiate or to add on an information. But the basic information is always on MR, is on these sequences, which can be, contrast can add on this, on these cases. And I can even, like in my next thing, I can even give you the cases exactly on which we do.
So, Dr. Naveen, it's what we really want to know. What is the indication for contrast? When should we order for and when should we request for an MRA contrast?
Like if you are looking for a healed spine, if you are like tubercular healed spine, if you are sending a case, then it is always good to provide a contrast. Degenerative diseases, we don't give contrast. Very rarely when there is an extruded disc material and epidural phlegmon, I have to differentiate. So what in spine and all, because it is required in 1 or 2 cases out of 10, my suggestion is always to write that contrast if required. If that is there, then we take a decision on table. That is a general thing. But usually on a borderline cases, and in cases of, or if you are, if we are doing a case of like a tumor, a vertebral tumor, a spinal cord tumor, then it is required. Cord and all, any lesion of cord, demyelination, tumors and all, contrast is required. In brain also contrast is required. But if I'm likely putting it only to the spine or musculoskeletal, then the spine, these are the cases. In musculoskeletal also, like if I talk about shoulder, hip and all, it is like required in about 1 to 2 cases in this thing. If I am seeing a tubercular shoulder, a tubercular knee, then I usually give. But in case of derangements, trauma and all, it is not needed. So whenever we can say inflammatory and neoplastic disorders, it is advisable you can add on from initial this thing, or in doubtful cases you can write MRI and contrast if required.
Like for the
Thank
case
you.
of myelomalacia and all that, should we go for a contrast?
Myelomalacia, usually contrast is not required. Myelomalacia is very picked up on this thing, but if myelomalacia and there's a cord lesion is there, a tumor is there in the cord, if that is, if demyelination is a differential diagnosis, then we give.
Dr. Naveen, there is quite a few questions on the chat now. There's a question from Dr. Gaurav saying that, do you have any image describing a PLC injury?
Posterior longitudinal ligament.
PLC, yeah. Posterior longitudinal, yeah.
Posterior longitudinal ligament or
Could you have? Do you have any image right now?
or posterior longitudinal ligament?
PLL.
Yes.
Oh, I don't think I will have, but I can show you the PLL. And any of
If you can put it on your screen for the guidance, yes.
Yeah.
Basically, PLL is usually at this location. Okay, I can just see the traumatic post-trauma in which we have. Most likely, we can see that. This black line is PLL, this one. This is posterior longitudinal ligament.
Okay.
This is anterior longitudinal ligament along the.
Yes.
These are interspinous ligaments. This is ligamentum flavum. This black color.
Thank you. Great.
Okay.
I hope that answered that question. There's quite a few questions on the.
I'm not able to see chat. I'm not able to see chat, so you will have to.
Okay. So I think they're writing to me privately. I think what everybody needs to do is to chat to send to everybody so that everybody can see that question. But I can tell you the questions that have been asked. One, Dr. Pageja is asking whether the significance of the canal diameter in the lumbar area and the significance with the disc prolapse, whether it's mild, moderate, severe. How do we classify the degree of compression on the with the canal diameter? As long and the foraminal compression, how do we actually classify and how do we say whether this is mild, moderate, or severe compression?
So in spine, if there's a disc herniation, as a disc convention, we take it like this, then we divide it into 1/3 this. If 1/3 is area is disc is causing compression of 1/3 of the thecal sac, we call this mild. If 2/3, it is moderate. If more than 2/3, it is marked or severe. That is one way to classify. Then we can also take an AP thecal sac diameter from at the mid sagittal level at this. It is usually 10 millimeter. But AP thecal sac diameter and vertebral measures are better on CT scan always than on MR, because in this, like cortex, PLL, ligamentum, ligaments and cortex, they have same signal intensity, so they cannot be differentiated. So we can just see the thecal sac diameter. If the thecal sac diameter usually is 10, if it is compressed about 3-4, it is mild. Between 3 to 6, it is moderate, and if more than 6 to 7, it is severe. Usually divide the canal like this. And in neural foramen also, when we are seeing a case in which there is a neural foramen, as in this case, usually if there is some fat, which is a residual fat, is seen in the neural foramen, we call it mild. And if it is like complete fat replacement, as is not visual, completely fat is not visualized in this, we call it severe.
Okay.
Yes.
I think then another question is from Mr. Ayush Bhargava. Myelomalacia changes. How do you read about the myelomalacia changes in the MRI? Dr. Naveen, can you hear us?
Yes, yes, yes. So
How do you,
myelomalacia,
doctor? Yeah.
yes, yes. Myelomalacia is seen. Myelo means cord. Malaysia means fluid. So now this on T2 weighted sequence, if in the cord we are able to see a signal intensity which is equal to CSF, like a fluid, we call it myelomalacia. If there is a compression of the this cord, and due to compression there is fluid-like signal intensity has come an irregular increase in intensity in the cord, we call it myelomalacia.
Dr. Maninder, I think you can ask the other person to keep mute because there's a lot of disturbance coming.
Okay, yeah, I think there's another question. Really, whether we need to do a repeat in a POT spine, do we need contrast imaging or not? I think you already answered that question, but would you like to
I
comment
can
on that specifically?
Usually for diagnosis it is not required. So I have to differentiate between a phlegmon or an abscess, which is usually visualized. So if I have to differentiate between an epidural phlegmon or an area of breakdown, I want to see whether it is an abscess, then we give contrast. And if on a treatment, if a patient is on treatment, and in a borderline case where I have to say that it's a healed case, usually we give contrast and see there is no contrast uptake. So if there is if there is a clear cut, we know that this is partially healed, then we usually don't give, because anyway contrast either CT or MR has some side effects. So we avoid giving contrast till it is absolutely necessary. So on borderline cases of healed spine, when we have to really diagnose it and say it is a healed case, we give contrast.
Okay, so does that mean that if there is an enhancing on the contrast, that means there is active disease there?
Yes, yes. There is also a catch there. But if I see an enhancing area and I see a cavity in that, if a cavity, sometime a residual cavity keep enhancing even after treatment. So this we have observed, and this is also there is the literature that. So if I see a cavity, I usually recommend that we give 3 months. We continue with the treatment. If the cavity remains as such and does not show any change, even for 3 months on ATT, then we call it. So sometime residual enhancement is seen on MR, which is there this thing. But usually, if there is a residual disease, contrast enhancement is there. If it is healed, contrast enhancement is not there. This is the usual case. And sometimes if cavity is there, then that point comes, that we follow up the cavity for some time and then say there is no disease only after seeing that the cavity is not changing over a period of time.
And specifically for tuberculosis, you see that sometimes the contrast enhancement can be visible for many months, even after the patient is actually, clinically much better. So does that mean that there is active disease, even if there's even a bit of contrast enhancing there, then that means there is active disease?
Sometime it happens also that if there is a fibrosis or there is a very large abscess which has nearly collapsed or this thing, it keeps enhancing. So what we do is, if we see it has nearly completely healed, but there is some enhancement is there, we follow it up for 3 months, and if it remains there for 3 months, it does not decrease further, and we know this is sometime fibrosis keep enhancing even after that, then we label it as healed. But if we see contrast, we want to see it after 3 months again to see whether it is further reducing or not. If it is not reducing, if it is same, we say it is.
Dr. Naveen, 1 second. So you said that if we generally try to use the contrast in case of healed lesion, suppose healed tuberculosis and all that. But when we can see the contrast enhancement, so in unhealed cases or healing cases, don't you think it's better to use it there also? Well, I couldn't understand the concept. If we can get a contrast enhancement.
Why we are not giving contrast in normal patients, in other patients of tuberculosis caries and all.
Right. If you can see the very good enhancement.
But usually it does not add to any like in the diagnosis, in the cases. Once in a while, as I told you, if it adds to it, then we give. But otherwise, in case of for diagnosis, it does not help. But if it is, we have to see a case which is healing, then we usually give. Like if somebody, if like I want to know whether it's healed or not, it is better to give. But if it is for diagnosis at all, usually it is not required.
Okay.
Because if we are giving contrast, it adds cost to the patient also, as well as we are exposing the patient to the contrast. So that is usually a concern in private as well as this thing, that if we are able to find out a clear findings and no overlap, then we don't give contrast.
Okay, then I think there was a question from Dr. Ravi Chauhan. So what is the rationale of doing repeat MRI after drainage of septic hip in pediatric population? Do we really require to follow it up or not?
Like in a septic hip, after treatment, if you want to see healed case, whether it is healed or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Do we really?
A healing in a septic hip, if followed up after this contrast is given, we will be able to see resolution of effusion, synovial hypertrophy, para-articular collections. All these resolutions can be seen. So it is wise to follow it up on MRI.
Dr. Vineet, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir, please.
Dr. Naveen, thanks. You made a very complex issue. You made it very simple to understand. I just want to know regarding, suppose there is a case where we are doubtful whether it is infection or it is malignancy or neoplasm. Like telltale sign of infection like collection or soft tissues are not there. At that stage, does a contrast help us in diagnosing and differentiating infection from tumor?
Yes, sir, definitely. In case of if there is a doubt between inflammatory disease or a neoplastic disease, it usually helps. Contrast helps. It adds to this. But are you asking about a vertebral lesion, a vertebral body lesion, if it is there with
Yes.
soft tissue?
Without, I mean, we don't. There is a doubt whether there is an infective lesion, or very often we see in our practice that we got a vertebral lesion and we are not able to make out whether it is infection, inflammation, or it is a tumor.
Yes, sir, in that case, usually contrast helps.
What will it show?
Like if there is any soft tissue, even there is a mild soft tissue beyond the vertebral body. Beyond the vertebral body, it is shows enhancement. It is better. In cases of end plate erosions and all, if there is a very subtle end plate erosion and we want to know whether the disc is involved or not, like disc is more in case of tuberculosis and not in case of neoplastic. So we give contrast to see whether the disc is involved or not. Any epidural soft tissue, paravertebral soft tissues, sensitivity is more. On overlapping cases, usually it helps.
It's not like that. Like you, I think you mostly use gadolinium as a contrast.
Yes,
and
yes.
It is more sensitive for infection. The infected tissue will pick up more of gadolinium than other tissues. Is that so?
No, even tumor will pick up. Like all will pick up. Their morphology of picking up will be different. There will be a difference between the way it picks up. Like if a abscess is there, it will show areas of breakdown. But if a metastasis with soft tissue is there, this thing, it will completely enhance. Whole of it will enhance as a solid tumor and not as a area of breakdown. So necrosis is also, even if necrosis is there, it will be a larger border. Brain and all, it is like much more cases of, if I talk about brain and spinal cord, we need contrast in 60-70% of cases. But if I say about vertebral bodies, spine and musculoskeletal, then it is slightly lesser as compared to Brain, any inflammatory disorder, I always give. We always give a contrast in case of any doubt, even a doubt of an inflammation, for meningeal enhancement and everything. But in vertebral bodies, usually the morphology helps.
Right. One small clarification I want from you: the classical teachings to us have been that fat is brighter, relatively brighter in T1, and fluid is brighter in T2. But you said the fat is black in T1 as well. Just clarify that.
Yes, absolutely. We can see this, that fat is white on T2, fat is white on T1, but it is slightly more white on T1. This we can say, all right? But it is white on both T1 and T2, and it is suppressed on this.
Equally white? You mean T1 and T2 is equally white, the fat?
On T1, it is slightly more white, very marginal difference. You can see between these two white. So, thoda though iska like contrast is different. So is there, but usually on T1, fat is slightly brighter than T2, but it is bright on both. That is why this stir sequence has come up, that it has a character of T2, but fat suppression. That's why this becomes a unique and a very important sequence. Stir or fat sat T2. They are like same functions.
Thank you.
You mean these stir images are required for everywhere wherever we had doubt, and there is overshadowing by the fat.
Right.
If you want to suppress the fat images, so you can always use a stir.
All cases, in all cases we do stir.
Naveen,
All cases.
I want to ask you one question.
Please.
In cervical area and the lumbar area, what is the normal canal you consider is normal millimeter? How much in cervical area and lumbar area? So that accordingly, sometimes the MRI report says this much is the canal diameter, then rest is clinical correlation. So just want to comment and need comment from you.
On MR, usually canal diameter was a photo of CT and not on MR. But over a period of time,
I get reports on MRI only. They mentioned that. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. But people started asking because CTs are not done and MR are done. So now there are multiple papers in which it is. But usually what convention we take is 10 millimeter. A thecal sac 10 millimeter is normal anywhere, cervical, dorsal, lumbar. 10 millimeter we take as a normal this thing. Below that, it is a compression of the thecal sac.
And how much less you feel we have to intervene? Less than 5 is, you think it's significant, is it? Less than 5 millimeter.
A very wonderful question. In lumbar spine, what because this I asked to so many orthopedic surgeons and all, what is the best? Even UK, I was sitting with this thing I discussed with him. So what most important thing I could get was that if quada equina nerve roots, all CSF around the quada equina nerve root is effaced. Like we say, there is effacement of the quada equina. If there is an effacement of the quada equina nerve root is written, then usually it becomes paresthesia and they start. So CSF goes off around the quada equina nerve root. That is the thing which needs intervention.
Dr. Lakiani.
Yes, Dr. Yes, Dr. Manocha, please.
About that fat and water, I want to make a little bit of comment. Like there are two things, water and fat. Yes. So I have heard the formula World War II, water is white in T2. That is one thing. Now why we need stir images is because there is a lot of fat in the bone. So in T1 images, if you want to see within the bone water also, the fat covers the watery fats. So that is why we have a stir image, so that the fat gets suppressed, so that the edema which is present within the bone substance now becomes avert in stir images. That's the reason for orthopedic cases, you need T1 images. So because you want to see the general anatomy and the bone normal appearance, then T2 images because you want to see the fluid content. Now when you want to see the fluid content within the bone, it is the stir images. That is how it's right.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because
Yeah.
we want,
That's the importance of images.
yes, because we want to see the marrow edema within the fat, or a soft tissue edema within the fat. Fat has to be suppressed to see that. Hence, this sequence becomes a very, very unique in picking up. There was one finding I wanted to show in this. Just see in this. Just see, there is an involvement of the spinous process also in this, which is not visualized on T1 and T2. But because of stir fat suppression, we know the spinous process as well as the edema in the paraspinal muscles is very well visualized. So this is the I'll say beauty of stir, that it picks up very small edema.
Great. Dr. Naveen, few of our residents want to know something about recent advances in the MRI diagnostics of musculoskeletal pathology. So would it be possible for you to keep it in the next lecture so that you can spare some time in the recent advances? Because that was asked as a long theory questions in the recent advance paper for the PG students. Will it be possible for you?
Yes, yes, yes.
Because I'm sure briefing in this time will not be sufficient and they will not get benefits.
So
Right?
I can
There's another question.
talk about that.
Yeah. There's another question, Dr. Naveen. How do you diagnose ossification of a posterior longitudinal ligament?
Now this is posterior longitudinal ligament.
Yes.
If it becomes thick, if this black color becomes thick, we call it thickening of posterior longitudinal ligament. And if its central portion starts showing marrow-like increased signal intensity on T1WI, we call it ossification of PLL. So ossification means there is some fatty changes have come within the thickened portion. So if there is thickening, which will be black on all three sequences, but if there is a central increased signal intensity on T1WI, that means there is ossification, there is some marrow has come, so we call it ossification of PLL.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers the question there.
Yeah. One more question, Dr. Naveen. What is the difference between the subligamentous and extraligamentous disc herniation?
So this was like, previously this was very commonly used, but now it is not much used clinically. So I did not talk about it, but still I'll show you this. This is seen in this. Now this is PLL, very beautifully visualized. PLL and thecal sac together.
Right.
So if this herniation goes beyond this and within the thecal sac, that means the PLL has is not contained and it has gone within the thecal sac and within the canal, and otherwise this just elevates it and compresses it. So this is there, but over a period of time, I don't know, you people have to tell me how clinically important this finding is, because we have stopped mentioning this in the reports.
No, but I think this really gives some idea about us whether you always say that the thecal sac is being compressed. So that means it is subligamentous. It has not gone inside the thecal sac. So once the thecal sac is ruptured and it has the PLL ruptured and it has gone to thecal sacs, so there could be chances of more compression, and that could I think clinically the patient get more severity.
Usually, sorry, I think I am wrong. It doesn't go within the thecal sac. It just breaks the PLL, remains outside the thecal sac, and remains in the this thing. That only thecal sac, it will only tear in case of injury. That only will it will not go within the thecal sac. That if it will go to within the thecal sac, it will migrate very far off, which I have not seen any case. So it is usually remains outside the thecal sac. It is epidural, but the PLL can be broken. In this, PLL is very well visualized. PLL and thecal sac will be so much together that they will be seen together in this case.
So you mean that if it is contained within the PLL, so it is subligamentous, and if it has gone beyond PLL, PLL,
Beyond
so
the
it is
PLL.
extra
Yes,
ligamentous.
yes, yes,
All right.
yes.
Right. And when we called it as an extra ligamentous, does that mean it has already sequestrated?
So that is a separate this thing. Sequestered is
Means
just
detached from the parent disc.
is in contact with the parent disc or not. That is a separate. In that definition, PLL does not come. And if it is in contact with that, then it is a sequestration. If it is extrusion, if it is not in contact with the parent disc, it is sequestration.
Okay. Dr. Naveen, one more thing that I want to know. When we were studying about the disc morphology, we were taught about it is called nucleus pulposus and annulus fibrosus. So
Yes.
annulus fibrosus is something which is very close to the PLL. Is it something?
See,
and how do you differentiate? Because
see this disc.
yes,
I'll just show you. See this disc.
right,
This is nucleus pulposus.
right.
This is annular fibrosis. This one. This black
Okay.
color on both the side is annulus, and the central portion is nucleus pulposus.
Okay. So the
That is
annulus is just adjacent to the PLL. Annulus
it's just adjacent to the PLL. So there is usually a annular tear takes place, which gets break, and the pulposus come out.
Right.
But in a degenerated disc, because pulposus is already fibrous, then it is black in color, and sometimes even this can be slightly white in color if the nucleus pulposus is white with this herniation. So
Right.
this is PLL. This is PLL. This black color. This is annulus, and this is nucleus pulposus.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that. Dr. Maninder, any other questions coming from you?
Dr. Debashish has raised his hand. Is he still want to say something? Dr. Debashish, you can unmute yourself if you want. Is he there? So there is one question. When do we say that the prevertebral space in the cervical spine is increased? What is the criteria for that? Dr. Naveen? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Just
Okay.
20.
All right. Okay.
So this is the cervical spine. This is the prevertebral space. Now on X-ray and all, when we used to read X-ray, we used to say 1 centimeter or something. But in this, anything coming at this, any collection or this thing coming at this position, prevertebrally, here at this is a prevertebral this thing. So any increase in space at this, if I measure it, it is like this much of space, which will be maybe 5 millimeter or something. But because we are able to see things now, the size has, even if it can be 3 millimeter abscess or 2 millimeter abscess, it is visualized. This is the trachea. This is the trachea. This is the vocal cords. This is like this is the trachea. This is the vocal cord. This is the prevertebral space. Any thickening here is any thickening collection will be prevertebral collection. We used to read it as 1 centimeter, but now I don't know. I don't want to tell anything to PGs, which is like I don't know what is written in the books. But any collection here will be called as prevertebral collection.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. And hello,
Yes,
Dr. Naveen, are you there? Yes. Dr. Maninder, any other question from the audience?
I don't think there's any other questions. If any audience, any participants want to ask any question, they can raise their hand, or they can unmute themselves and ask it if they want. I think that's.
Meanwhile, I can just put one doubt to Dr. Naveen. Dr. Naveen, there has been mention in many of the MRIs the anterior disc herniation. What is the significance of that? Posteriorly, we all know because there's a cord and compressions out there. If there's anterior disc
nothing
herniation,
like
what is the
anterior
significance
disc herniation. I haven't written in my report till today. So some people write it like this, but it has no clinical significance. This is the anterior portion of the disc. It has no clinical significance, this thing, and we usually don't write. I don't think that this is something which is mentioned in the books or something. Maybe this they must be mentioning.
Yeah, because that's what I'm saying. This does not give us any clinical finding because this is not leading to any solution to the patient.
No
And
clinical significance.
some of the radiologists, they are mentioning anterior disc herniation. I don't know.
Dr. Naveen,
Yes, sir.
somebody from Nepal has asked how you make this distinction between a compression nerve root as traversing nerve root or an exiting nerve root. So that question has not been answered. This is
Okay.
just a question asked by somebody.
Fine. I'm just so. Usually what happens, if we talk about lumbar spine, then one nerves come out at, if I'm at L3-4 level, then one nerve comes out from L3-4 foramen and one nerve goes down and comes from this foramen. So this usually at L3-4 level, L3 is the exiting nerve and L4 is the traversing nerve. At all the level it is like this. At L4, 5, this is L4, this is L4, this is L5. The nerve which is coming out at this level is an L4 nerve, and the nerve which is going down and coming at this level, it is an L5 nerve. So, which is in the neural foramen is usually the traversing nerve, and that which comes out of the foramen is a exiting nerve. If this is not clear, then I can show you one case of my. I can also show you. Is it fine?
Yeah, sure. Go on.
Or I can show you one case of. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, very much.
So this is T2 weighted sagittal image, and this is a T1 weighted axial image. T2 weighted axial image. This is fine?
Yes.
Okay. Now at any one level, if I go at this level, one nerve is coming out in the neural foramen. One nerve comes out in the neural foramen, and one nerve goes down and comes out at next level. So usually a nerve which is in the lateral recess. Now this nerve is in the lateral recess. This is traversing, and this nerve is exiting. Very well visualized at L5S1 level. This is an exiting nerve which comes out of the neural foramen, and this is a traversing nerve which is in the lateral recess. This is lateral recess. So at each level this takes place.
So I'm sure, I think that answers the question from the delegate who was asked from the Nepal. I think he put the question quite early, and unfortunately we missed the question.
Yeah, it was quite elementary, but confusing for the DNPs.
Yes, you're
so
right.
It is still confusing. Shall I?
No. You have explained it very well. I hope he has got his answer.
Dr. Maninder, any other question from in the chat? If you can see, because most of the questions are being shared on private chat, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's the Dr. Bageja has a comment is basically suggestion that we need to have a MRI basic knee class after seeing this excellent spine class. We need to have a knee class next time. And,
yes, definitely it will be there.
There's another question.
I would like to have your feedback. That was this. I kept it very basic.
That's okay. Very good, Dr. Naveen. That's enough for orthopedic surgeons.
Yeah. Many times we are even struggling to get that information also.
And there's another question. Could you show a smaller node? How does it look like? And
yes, it is very frequently mentioned in the MRI reports.
Do you
Many
have
times.
any picture showing any of
This
the
is a
nodes?
small node. Can you see?
Yes.
No, if
This is a chronic small node. If
Yeah.
sometime there is edema also. So if there is edema, we call it acute small node. So basically, disc herniation within the body of the vertebra is a
So much.
small node. So this is a
Yeah.
small nodes visualized in this.
so you mean disc herniation within the body? Body seems to be the end plate seems to be so
Yeah.
soft that it can herniate over there.
Yes. The central portion sometimes it herniates with degeneration. So this is a small node. Exactly.
And what is the significance?
Sometimes
Degeneration.
if they have if acute small node can have severe pain, can have edema. Sometimes they overlap with tubercular focal lesion in the tubercular lesion, and a small nodes can be a differential. Means in about 6 months, in one case I find that there can be an overlap also. This when I'm able to see an edema and I want to differentiate it from an end plate erosion and edema. So this sometime overlaps takes place, but this is the exact chronic small node along inferior end plate of L2 vertebral body. We call this like this.
So that's great. Dr. Maninder, then if everything is done, then we can request Dr. Sharad Agarwal to give a vote of thanks to all the delegates.
Yeah, sure. Can I just say that we had more than 100 100 participants is the maximum we could have on the chat, and we had 100 for the good part. So I think that's a good
Yes.
positive sign. There's quite a few physios from our department, from ISIC. So I thank them all for joining in. But I think there were a lot of orthopedic PGs, and I think we've had a great response today. But over to Dr. Sharad, please. Thank you.
Well, my
Thank you.
sincere thanks, Dr. Naveen. As I said earlier, you made a complex issue very simple. And we could, for the first time, I think you understood what MRI is really.
Thank you so much.
And as they said, that participant could have been more than 100 because I've seen some messages on our WhatsApp that they're not able to enter the seminar, the symposium,
Yeah,
because of there is a
I think we have to look at
Yeah.
another portal which will allow us to take more than 100 for
yes,
next
yes.
time, for the next
Dr.
class.
Maninder, this was the one which has some privately owned this Zoom class. Or didn't we have the more than 300 participants? Isn't
No,
it
no, this is
possible?
100. This is 100.
It is 100 only. Okay. So
And-
I thought we could have more than 100 in this also. So that was, I think.
No, we can have unlimited time, but we can't have it more than 100.
Dr. Naveen would be, Dr. Naveen, this shows you are such a big hit that
Yeah.
only that gate crashing wasn't allowed here.
So people were-
will force us to have a bigger platform next time. So that
Yes, sir,
everybody
agreed.
Yeah, we need to
And-
do that. Yeah.
we really look forward to you for many more classes, like advanced spine and the knee and the shoulder and whatnot.
Definitely, we can. It is a great privilege that to me that you have considered me for this, and
It's a real pleasure. Thanks to you, all the participants and all the delegates, and welcome. We welcome you next Saturday again, all of you.
Yeah, and Dr. Naveen, you have to come prepared with one more question. That recent advances in the musculopathology.
yes,
MRI.
that I'll discuss with you.
Yeah,
And
because I
discuss-
think
as you will tell me, we can.
yeah, next class will be Dr. Manocha will be taking classes for the shoulder examination, and I think after that you will be able to take up the class for the our PGs. Am I-
yes, can
am I
discuss
right?
with you in format. Yes, sir.
Right.
So
And,
the recording
Dr.
of this webinar will be going on to YouTube tonight, and I will send the link on the DOA group once
that's
it's uploaded. We have a special channel now for the Delhi Orthopedic Association, a YouTube channel called DOA
Very good.
Webinars, and so we'll upload all the webinars onto that from now on.
And the previous one also uploaded, Dr.
Yeah, the previous
Maninder?
one, unfortunately, we have only 70% of it, so I'm debating whether to put that on or not. The initial part is lost due to some technical issue, but we can start with this one and the other ones which Dr. Dhawan has held. We got the recordings for those. So all those will go on to the webinar channel, and
Okay.
we can view all of them once they are. We'll send the link.
Okay, that will be great. That will be great.
That's
But in
great.
fact, a few of my residents, they were asking for the Lisfranc injury session.
So I
So
can.
what should I ask them?
I don't have the whole one. It's partial. So the initial 5-10 minutes or 15 minutes is lost.
So maybe we can share your PPT with them. Will it be possible?
Yeah, I can share the PPT. No problem.
Yeah, that will be great. That will be great for them.
Dr. Pageja is going to teach us about Lisfranc again. So,
sir, first May को फिर से मीटिंग है सर. Yeah.
Yes.
Congratulations sir, Dr. Sharad आपने करवा दिया YouTube का and Dr. Hitesh Lal ने करवा दिया, because that's very important for every work should be seen by postgraduates, by consultant, by practitioners, everybody. That is all.
it's a contribution from everybody.
Yes sir.
Yes,
Agreed.
sir. The DO is working as a team. So with that, I think we end this meeting. And Dr. Maninder, thanks to you for giving us support. And I think
Thank
for
you.
hosting such a marvelous session for us.
Giving the platform again this time also. Thank you.
Thanks Maninder, and thanks
Thank you.
Vineet.
Thank you.
Okay,
Right.
take care.
Great
Thank you
show.
very much. See you
Bye,
then.
Dr.
next
Naveen
time.
Najani.
Dr. Lalit, thank you
Bye,
for
Sharad sir.
joining in. Dr. Mani,
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Bye,
sir.
Dr. Manocha. Great.
Thanks.
thank you.
Nice meeting you.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
sir.